Executive Director of New Faces, New Voices. New Faces is a Pan-African network of women in business and finance. It was established by Graça Machel through an initiative called Multiplying Faces, Amplifying Voices. As New Faces, we believe in bringing women to the center stage of the financial sector to drive change that will empower women economically. As an organization, we have three primary objectives. The first is to increase women's access to finance and financial services. The second is to build the skills and capacity of African women as entrepreneurs and as business leaders. And the third is to increase the number, the visibility, and the impact of women in the financial sector. We believe that by harnessing the economic potential of women, we can fundamentally change the economic landscape of Africa in a way that will benefit financial institutions through their bottom lines, but also that will benefit African societies at large. Why is this important? It's important because investing in women and girls is a developmental imperative. Research shows that by investing in women, you actually improve the health and the education, the income levels of your society. Currently, at the moment, there are disparities in Africa in terms of women's access to capital, and you see it in statistics which show, for example, that women produce 60 to 80% of the food on the continent, but they have access to 1% of agricultural credit. In terms of private equity investing, the billions of dollars that are invested throughout Africa, women's share of that is a mere 9%. Lastly, according to a G20 report looking at challenges that women entrepreneurs face in accessing finance, we find in Africa again the existence of a credit gap, a 20 billion credit gap, where women are not able to access finance to grow and develop their businesses. At New Faces, we believe in working with a broad range of strategic partners. We are very fortunate to have had, right from the very beginning, the full support of President Donald Kaberuka and the African Development Bank, who believe in our agenda and who are strong advocates for gender, because in their work as well, they see the importance of investing in women in order to ensure the growth and prosperity of the African continent. In addition to the African Development Bank, we have partners that we call drivers of change. And these are institutions, financial institutions, but also other institutions that we work with who are targeting the women's market segment, and that we engage to try to see what they can do to be innovative, to better address the needs of this market, to conduct research in finding out what it is that women need. But more importantly, with the drivers of change, what we do as New Faces is get them to make concrete pledges, specific things that they can do as institutions to advance the economic empowerment of women, to increase women's access to finance, and to drive the leadership of women in the financial sector. The institutions that joined us at the first summit in Nairobi have made pledges which we have documented in a report, and these pledges demonstrate that concrete things can be achieved within specific time frames that will actually move the goalposts forward. As a Pan-African organization, we strongly believe in having a footprint throughout Africa, and as an organization we have consolidated the vision of New Faces by establishing national chapters. Currently we have chapters in 15 countries. Those countries are in Southern Africa, in West Africa, in North Africa, and in Central Africa. And it is really the chapters that are going to drive the agenda of New Faces through programs and projects that they initiate that address our focus areas, the three that I mentioned previously. The chapters are currently working with us to refine their program of activities, and with the support of institutions like the African Development Bank, we are looking at mechanisms to really strengthen the ability of chapters to both assess what are the needs of women on the ground, but also to ensure that by working with their own local strategic partners, that delivery does in fact occur. We are now holding our second African Women's Economic Summit in Lagos. We chose Lagos very specifically as a destination because Nigeria has very interesting dynamics on this continent. We are told that in 10 years' time, or maybe even less, Nigeria will be the largest economy on the African continent. We certainly find in Nigeria examples of very powerful women in the financial sector. 5 of the largest banks in the country are led by women CEOs. The finance minister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, is somebody who is globally renowned for being an expert in her field and a practitioner for many, many years. And we see very interesting developments occurring in Nigeria, led by the Central Bank of Nigeria under Governor Sanusi. We see reforms that are taking place within the banking sector. Targets are being set to increase the numbers of women in management positions. And so Nigeria represents for us a very good example of what other African countries can strive to achieve. Having said that, though, the anomaly is that Nigeria still has very low levels of financial inclusion for women in particular. Less than 20% of Nigerian women have access to finance or are formally banked. And so we see that as much as progress is being made, there are still a lot of challenges that exist within African countries. Increasing the number of our bank population is certainly one of them. But I think we are very pleased by the choice of having by having the summit in Nigeria. We've received a lot of support from Nigerian institutions who have come on board as sponsors, Access Bank and First Bank of Nigeria, and certainly the Bank of Industry has been one of our key strategic partners for the summit. And we also need to recognize some of our sponsors coming from outside Nigeria and South Africa, the bank, as well as the Open Society Initiative of Southern Africa, OSISA, and the German Development Agency, and Making Finance Work for Africa. I'd just like to close by saying that we as New Faces believe that it is extremely important that our agenda be seen not as a women's issue, but really as a developmental agenda. It is critical that African governments and countries invest in women so that we can increase the pace of economic development on the continent. And therefore, for us, bringing women center stage is an imperative. And I'd like to end with our slogan, as New Faces, which is nothing about us without us.
My name is Ginette-Ursule. I am the head of the Gender and Social Development Division at the African Development Bank. The African Development Bank is very committed and proud, we can say, to have this strategic partnership with New Faces, with New Voices, as a credible Pan-African association dealing with very pertinent thematic which concerns the access of finance to a lot of women all around the continent who are doing very good things, but who are not able to seize all the opportunity to use all their capabilities because the laws, because the legal environment is not so easier for them. So we are here for the summit in order to discuss, and very important, to make some concrete pledges so that we can move forward with some actions at the institutional level concerning the CSOs, concerning all the organization and the excellencies, the personalities who attend the summit, so that we can move forward. I think that this specificity of the African Women Economic Summit, which is to do some pledges, to be committed, and every 2 years to come back and concretely show to all what kind of improvements they have achieved, is a very strong reason for which we at the African Development Bank, we trust in this partnership. Because we don't want to have one conference among the others conference. We want to make the difference. So in doing that, for sure, our final objective as the bank is result-oriented is to change the face of the African continent. Because we know that 50% of people, let's say women in this continent, are doing very, very, very strong efforts in peace resolutions, in conflict resolutions, in agriculture, in services, in trade, but at the same time, they don't benefit from this so-called growth Africa is now realizing. So it is the time to think about that, and we want to assume our leadership as the first the first institutional development partner. We want to open the doors with this partnership led by a very, very, very brilliant woman, Mrs. Machel, so that we can promote an advocacy on this question. And at the same time, I want to say that this year will be a very important year for the African Development Bank. Why? Because we are planning to adopt this year a revised gender strategy. It will be a shift in the way of doing things. For sure, women economic empowerment will be at the core of this strategy with concrete action. We have already started during the annual meetings in Arusha towards the launching of the African Guarantee Fund. But it is the first step. We want to achieve another steps. We will also, through this gender strategy, point out the legal environment in where the women, the African women, are in jail. We have to think about reforms in financial sector, but in other sectors too. We have to think, for example, on this land tenure. We have to think about this right they don't have in order to develop their activities. So the core reason of this strategic partnership with New Faces in Voices is two. We can say two reasons. First of all, to support strongly their advocacy, to make their advocacy credible without us beyond. And second, to make some concrete actions, because NFNV, in 2 years, we have now 15 chapters all around the continent, as said by Nomsa. They need strong support at the secretariat level so that they can have a very good coordination on all the continent side. And they need also strong support at the national level. So our engagement will be on this side. Support their advocacy, assist them in growing, and for sure we have a development bank. We have to identify some funds in order to finance their concrete activities on the ground. This is in line with our strategy, our current strategy, our forthcoming long-term strategy, which is an inclusive, sustainable growth strategy. So we think at the African Development Bank that it is the right way to deliver substantial, pertinent, good services to the citizens of the continent.
What specific role has the African Development Bank played to elevate the status of grassroots women in Africa? This is Choice FM. What specific role has the bank played? Quel est le rôle de la Banque africaine pour améliorer le statut des femmes au niveau local?
Très bien. I think that this is a very pertinent question. When I mentioned earlier the fact that in the revised gender strategy we address very deeply this question of land tenure, this question of legal environment. But I can say now that 30% of our projects are identified as gender-sensitive projects. And you know that the infrastructure, the agriculture, the trade are always at the core of our portfolio. So towards our cooperation, towards our projects, what do we do concretely? We try to finance some roads in order to help these women in these rural areas to promote their services, to be able to sell their goods. We try to give them some support, financial or technical support, in order for them to be best organized so that they can face the other stakeholders in carrying their duties. But we think that we have to move forward. We have to make some other concrete by some reforms on this side.
Next. Combining work with taking care of the home front as well as a career woman, how best can women surmount this challenge in order to contribute meaningfully to the economy?
Well, I think that African women are the masters really at juggling numerous roles, but at the same time contributing to the economy. Yes, it is true that women have to be the main caregivers of the family. Yes, it is the case, though, in Africa, that women also have to go out and earn an income. Africa has one of the highest rates of labor absorption, and it's oftentimes driven by necessity. Women have to work because in order to alleviate poverty, in order to improve the welfare of their families. But I think one of the things that we, as New Faces, continue to challenge is that African women, the contribution that African women make tends to be unrecognized because women are still operating at the margins. The majority of African women operate in the informal economy, and because there's very little data on the nature of the activity and it hasn't been quantifiable, it's oftentimes not really recognized and it tends to be minimized. We think that if you actually document, if our countries took the time to actually document the economic contribution that women were making, we would find that actually women play a much stronger role in the economy than we think. Already, if you see it in the numbers of women entrepreneurs and the percentage of women entrepreneurs in different countries. In South Africa, for example, a recent study showed that 58% of entrepreneurs were women. In countries like Uganda and Kenya, the numbers are similar. 30 to 40% of entrepreneurs are women. The problem, though, is that the majority of these entrepreneurs tend to be micro and small. And so we feel that we need a renewed focus on the part of our governments and policymakers to really help those micro entrepreneurs to grow their businesses from small to medium and from medium to large. And the way to do that is to create the right kind of policy environment for them, but also to ensure that they have adequate technical assistance and training. And key to that is access to finance and having the ability to finance the growth of their businesses.
Next. Family planning and its negative effect on women. Some organizations have made it mandatory for their female workers to ensure that they adopt use of contraceptives, family planning pills, to control the rate they give birth while in active service. The organization believed that productivity on part of married female worker is low on annual basis, having observed 4-month annual leave on yearly basis. Do you believe that women should be subjected to this treatment, or how do we guide against the negative effect of the use of pills by women while in active service?
I think that the conclusion of the question is a little bit controversial. What I can say is that the question of family planning must be addressed at 2 levels. First of all, it is a personal commitment, because the key question is to be able to educate the children you have. The key question is to be able to have the money, the time, in order to give to your children the best education they can have in order to face all these obstacles in the new world. And the other level is a global level concerning the community, concerning the national level. Because the question is to have, as I told earlier, to have some services, public services, in order to, for the health, for the education, for the roads, things like that, so that these people can have better life than the elders or things like that. So personally, I think that obliging people to go in this way, it is a sort of opposition with human rights, because I think it is not the best way to do. You can explain, you can consider each case, you can consider each country, because different countries have different levels of human development indicators, so we can't generalize these kind of things. It is clear that in a situation of post-conflict country, for example, you face some difficult situation. You can, perhaps suppose you have some women who are alone, propose in a transitional period this kind of, not solution, but I say this kind of attitude in order to face the environment, to face the situation. But for sure, it is not a question of obligation, a question of constraints. It is a question of advocacy, a question of assistance, technical assistance, and as I said earlier, financial assistance, because the key thing is how you can educate these people you want to have. The key question is here.
Next one. This is from Aminata.com. In reality, the English-speaking country women have more access to the financial capital than to the French-speaking. How to reduce this disparity between English-speaking countries and French-speaking countries?
This second summit, which is led by New Faces University, supported by the African Development Bank, has for sure one purpose. This is to deal on financing the future of the African women, that is to say for Africa. But the specificity of this Lagos summit is that we have a lot of French-speaking countries represented here, so that they can share their views, their experiences with their brothers coming from other countries, where some very important reforms have been done in Kenya, in Nigeria. And we think, at the African Development Bank, by sharing experiences, by sharing reforms, by sharing ideas, innovative ideas, we can change the behavior of people. We can build some networks in order to move forward. It is clear that in French-speaking countries, the institutional environment on the financial side is not so deeply developed. Perhaps because of the historical reason. Look at, for example, the West Africa CFA franc. But for us to move forward is to create this space of exchanging experiences, this space of creating networks, so that we can learn together and move forward with best solutions.
And just to add to that, I think the disparities in women's access to finance in Africa also exist geographically. It isn't just a linguistic difference. For example, if you look at North Africa, because of the cultural norms and traditions in that part of Africa, you tend to find that women as a whole have greater restrictions placed on their ability to work outside their home, and in turn, again, the statistics show that there's a very large disparity in access to finance among North African women and other parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But as Ginette said, the purpose of the summit is to bring all of the key stakeholders throughout Africa together: central banks, government policymakers, commercial banks, research institutions, so that we can learn from each other, so that we can share experiences, and by identifying drivers of change in different regions of the continent, we can demonstrate what are the things that are working best, what are the best practices, what are the things that are worth emulating, what are the success stories, so that those countries that are perhaps lagging behind can see the potential for themselves in developing women, so that we then move to a situation where the disparities over time are reduced and eliminated.
What are the plans in terms of promoting education for young girls? Are there any initiatives set for this? What are the plans in terms of promoting education for young girls? Are there any initiatives set for this?
As New Faces, we believe very much in promoting financial literacy. And financial literacy for us doesn't start when women are fully grown adults. It starts when they are children, young children. It starts in helping children to develop a culture of understanding numbers in the business world. It starts with giving children the opportunity to interface with banks, to open savings accounts. It starts with giving children knowledge about how to manage their own money and personal finances. And through those educational initiatives, which can be introduced into the school curriculum, we will gradually see that women as well as men become much more comfortable in dealing with banks, much more knowledgeable about how to manage their own personal finances, much more knowledgeable about how having a savings culture as part of a country really contributes to the financial stability of that country. So financial education is critical, and the earlier that we start in educating our girls, the better off our societies will be.
As we are a Pan-African institution, I will speak in French now. I think we have some journalists from French-speaking countries. Oui, effectivement, la promotion de l'éducation des jeunes filles est un aspect essentiel de la politique, de toute politique d'égalité de genre, parce que nous savons que du fait des traditions, des coutumes, dans un certain nombre de pays africains, les jeunes filles ne sont pas habilitées à aller à l'école, ou en tout cas y vont de façon disproportionnée par rapport aux hommes. Quoique, en matière de disparité de genre, il y a aussi des pays ces dernières années qui souffrent aussi d'une disparité négative par rapport aux jeunes hommes. La question est que, en ce qui concerne l'éducation primaire, c'est vraiment la base de la construction d'une nation.